As the once mighty Roman Empire began to fragment, traditional narratives often place the blame on barbarian invasions and internal decay. But what happens when we take a closer look at the figures who led these barbarian tribes? How did their actions, decisions, and strategies, often underestimated, directly influence the collapse of one of history's greatest empires? Barbarian leaders such as Alaric, Attila, and Genseric are frequently remembered as mere invaders. But their contributions to the fall of Rome go far beyond mere plundering and destruction. Each, in their own way, exploited Roman weaknesses in innovative ways, using tactics that were decisive in undermining the stability of the empire. Instead of just recounting battles and invasions, this video offers a detailed and unprecedented analysis of how these leaders not only fought against Rome, but also shaped the fate of Western civilization. We'll uncover the lesser-known aspects of their strategies and motivations, revealing how they contributed to the end of an era and the birth of a new order in Europe. Get ready to see the fall of Rome in a completely new light, where the barbarians are not just destroyers, but key agents of historical transformation. The rise of the barbarians, context and motivations. As the Roman Empire expanded, so did its vulnerabilities. Vast borders and a complex administration created fissures that, over time, turned into deep chasms. The barbarian tribes, located along the empire's frontiers, observed these weaknesses with growing interest. These groups were not merely lurking raiders, but structured societies with clear leadership and objectives. The pressure exerted on the empire from various fronts, from the Goths to the Huns, was not merely a result of baseless barbarian aggression. It was a response to Roman policies that frequently marginalized them, forcing them to act. The first step in understanding the fall of Rome is to recognize that the rise of the barbarians was driven by both their own motivations and the opportunities created by the empire's failures. Moreover, the relationship between Romans and barbarians was paradoxical. While Rome saw these tribes as threats, it also depended on them for border protection. Many barbarians were recruited as soldiers in the Roman legions, where they learned advanced military tactics and gained a deep understanding of Roman weaknesses. These same legions, composed of barbarian soldiers, would often turn against Rome, using their acquired knowledge to challenge the empire from within. Thus, the rise of the barbarians cannot be seen merely as an external movement. It was also a consequence of Rome's own integration and marginalization policies. Finally, migration and demographic pressure also played a crucial role. Barbarian tribes, pressured by factors such as climate changes, resource shortages, and the threat of other nomadic peoples, were forced to seek new lands. This led them to invade Roman territories, not just as invaders, but as peoples in search of survival. These migratory movements, often desperate, were misinterpreted by Rome, which saw them only as a threat rather than an opportunity for negotiation and coexistence. The rise of the barbarians, therefore, was a complex phenomenon fueled by both their internal needs and the fragile dynamics of the Roman Empire. Alaric and the Siege of Rome, a strategy of attrition. Alaric, the leader of the Visigoths, is a central figure in the narrative of Rome's fall. However, his strategy went far beyond a simple invasion. Alaric realized that attacking Rome directly was not the only way to subdue the empire. Instead, he adopted an attritional approach, repeatedly besieging Rome and exploiting the empire's political and economic weaknesses. Rather than conquering the city through bloody battles, he isolated Rome, cutting off its supply routes and forcing the city into submission through starvation and desperation. Alaric was not just a warrior, but a strategist who understood that victory could be achieved through psychological manipulation as much as through military force. The Siege of Rome in 410 Anno Domini was the culmination of a series of campaigns that eroded Roman morale. Alaric, aware of internal tensions within the empire, used his position to exploit Rome's weaknesses, demanding ransoms, tributes, and negotiations that further undermined the city's stability. Alaric's sack of Rome was a symbolic blow that resonated throughout the empire, but his true genius lay in how he managed to keep the pressure on Rome for so long without a direct and definitive confrontation. Alaric proved that psychological and economic warfare could be as devastating as any open battle. Furthermore, Alaric knew how to exploit political divisions within Rome. He negotiated with different factions, promising support to one side or the other, always with the intention of weakening the empire's internal cohesion. His skill in manipulating Roman politics and using diplomacy as a weapon was a decisive factor that led to the fall of Rome. Rather than being seen merely as a destructive barbarian, Alaric should be recognized as a leader who deeply understood Roman power dynamics and knew how to use them to his advantage. His attritional strategy not only weakened Rome militarily, but also eroded its identity as the Eternal City. Attila the Hun, the terror of the Roman frontiers. Attila, known as the Scourge of God, is one of the most feared figures in Roman history. Leading the Huns, Attila not only terrorized the Western Roman Empire, but also the Eastern Roman Empire, spreading fear and chaos along the empire's borders. But contrary to the image of an irrational barbarian, Attila was a shrewd leader with a deep strategic understanding of how to manipulate both his enemies and his own allies. He knew that the strength of the Huns lay not only in their brutality, but also in their ability to move swiftly and strike with surgical precision. His campaign of devastation was meticulously planned, targeting critical points in the empire that, once hit, would leave Rome vulnerable and unable to respond effectively. Attila was also a master of barbarian diplomacy, using veiled threats and promises of alliance to weaken Roman resistance even before his armies moved. He forged temporary alliances with rival tribes and used uncertainty to create a constant atmosphere of tension within the Roman borders. When he attacked, he did so unpredictably, spreading destruction and forcing the Romans to defend themselves on multiple fronts, which diluted their forces. His campaign in Gaul and the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 Anno Domini are examples of how Attila used both brute force and psychological warfare to destabilize the empire, almost pushing Rome to the brink of collapse. Furthermore, Attila's skill in exploiting the empire's internal weaknesses was notable. He negotiated directly with the emperor and his court, extracting astronomical tributes that further weakened the Roman economy. Attila understood that true power lay in the ability to demoralize the enemy, and his campaigns were as much about conquest as they were about instilling terror. This terror was not just a military tactic, but a tool of control, causing many regions to surrender without a fight, preferring to pay tribute rather than face his wrath. Attila, therefore, was not merely a barbarian invader, but a strategist who knew how fear and manipulation could be used as powerful weapons in his campaign against Rome. Genseric and the sack of Rome. More than just piracy. Genseric, the king of the Vandals, is often remembered for the sack of Rome in 455 Anno Domini, one of the most devastating events in the empire's history. However, reducing his contribution to mere piracy would be a grave mistake. Genseric was a leader with a strategic vision that went beyond simple conquest. He aimed to destabilize Rome systematically. After establishing a powerful Vandal kingdom in North Africa, a crucial region for Rome's supply, Genseric used his fleet to cut off the empire's supply lines, depriving Rome of essential resources. This control over the Mediterranean gave Genseric disproportionate power, allowing him to strike whenever and wherever he wished, becoming a constant threat to Rome. The sack of Rome by Genseric was not an impulsive act, but the result of careful calculation. Genseric exploited political divisions within the empire, allying himself with one of the rival factions in Rome, and when the opportunity arose, marched on the city with a prepared and motivated army. His sack was methodical and surgical, unlike Alaric, who sought to break Rome through starvation and siege. Genseric plundered the city with the goal of stripping it of its wealth and weakening it economically. He took with him a vast amount of treasure, including religious and cultural artifacts, symbolizing the fall of Rome as a center of power and prestige. In addition to the sack, Genseric was a master at using naval warfare to terrorize the empire. His Vandal fleet patrolled the Mediterranean, attacking coastal cities and cutting off trade, which further weakened the Roman economy. The impact of his actions was not only immediate but also long-term, contributing to the fragmentation of Roman power and the rise of new forces in the region. Genseric turned the concept of piracy into a form of economic and psychological warfare, demonstrating that control of the sea was as crucial as land conquest. His legacy was a humiliated Rome, never to fully regain its former glory. The role of barbarians in the Roman military, enemies or allies. One of the most intriguing dynamics in the fall of the Roman Empire was the ambiguous relationship between Romans and barbarians within the empire's own military forces. During the final centuries of Rome, many barbarians were recruited to serve as soldiers and officers in the Roman legions. Initially, this integration was seen as a way to strengthen the army with experienced warriors. But over time, this reliance proved to be a double-edged sword. The increasing presence of barbarians in the Roman ranks meant that the empire was, paradoxically, training and arming those who would eventually turn against it. This transformation of the Roman army into a multicultural force, while necessary to defend the vast borders of the empire, ultimately undermined its cohesion and loyalty. The barbarians were not just ordinary soldiers. Many rose to positions of command, where they had direct access to Roman military strategies and secrets. Barbarian leaders like Stilicho, of Vandal origin, even held high-ranking positions such as commander-in-chief of the Roman forces in the West. Despite their nominal loyalty to Rome, Stilicho and others like him often found themselves in a delicate position, torn between their tribal roots and their duties to the empire. This duality created internal tensions that were exploited by both the Romans and the barbarians, often resulting in betrayals and conflicts that further weakened the Roman military structure. Additionally, the use of barbarian troops as allies in Roman civil wars and internal disputes exacerbated the fragmentation of the empire. Rival Roman factions frequently hired barbarian tribes as mercenaries, offering them land and riches in exchange for military support. These alliances of convenience, while effective in the short term, accelerated the disintegration of central Roman power. The barbarians, initially allies, became increasingly independent, using their knowledge of the Roman system for their own ends. Thus, the role of barbarians in the Roman military was dual. While they helped defend the empire, they also sowed the seeds of its destruction, becoming so intertwined with Rome's fate that they were at once its defenders and its executioners. Barbarian diplomacy. Alliances and betrayals in the fall of Rome. As the Roman Empire weakened, diplomacy became a crucial tool for both Romans and barbarians. Instead of simple military confrontations, the fall of Rome was marked by a complex web of alliances and betrayals, where diplomacy played a central role. Barbarian leaders, far from being crude warriors with no political sense, proved to be masters of negotiation and manipulation. Alaric, Attila, and Genseric, for example, not only fought against Rome, but also engaged in intricate negotiations with Roman emperors, using promises of peace and threats of war to advance their agendas. Alaric, in particular, used diplomacy as a weapon to weaken Rome from within. He alternated between being an ally and an enemy, negotiating agreements that were often broken as quickly as they were made. His ability to exploit political divisions within Rome allowed him to manipulate senators and generals, pitting them against each other and securing concessions that strengthened his position. Attila, on the other hand, negotiated directly with Eastern Emperor Theodosius II, extorting vast sums of gold in exchange for temporary peace. These negotiations were not just financial transactions. They were also ways for Attila to assert his power and impose his will on the empire. Betrayals also played a vital role in the fall of Rome. Alliances formed under the pressure of desperate circumstances often dissolved quickly, leading to acts of betrayal that accelerated the collapse of the empire. A classic example is Rome's alliance with the Visigoths, which, after years of mutual cooperation, ended in conflict when the interests of the two parties diverged. Genseric, with his characteristic cunning, used betrayal as a diplomatic tool, exploiting internal divisions in Rome to strike at the right moment. These acts of betrayal were not merely breaches of trust, but deliberate strategies to weaken the enemy and gain an advantage in a political game where survival was at stake. The consequences of the fall, the formation of barbarian kingdoms. The fall of the Roman Empire was not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new order in Europe, shaped by the very barbarians who contributed to its downfall. With the collapse of Roman central authority, various barbarian kingdoms began to emerge in the former provinces of the empire. These kingdoms, formed by Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, and others, were not simple continuations of the old tribes. They represented a new form of political and social organization. Each barbarian leader who conquered Roman lands faced the challenge of ruling a diverse population, including both Romans and barbarians, forcing them to adapt Roman traditions to their own cultures. The Visigoths, under leaders like Alaric and his successors, established a lasting kingdom in Gaul and Hispania, which became a cornerstone of medieval Europe. The Vandals, led by Genseric, founded a powerful kingdom in North Africa, controlling a strategic region that had been crucial for Rome's supply lines. The Franks, under Clovis, consolidated their power in Gaul, laying the groundwork for the future kingdom of France. These barbarian kingdoms not only inherited Roman territories, but also assimilated aspects of Roman culture and institutions, creating a unique synthesis that would influence Europe for centuries. However, the formation of these kingdoms also brought significant challenges. The absence of a strong central power led to constant disputes over territory and resources, both among the barbarian kingdoms and with the Roman populations that still resisted domination. The new barbarian rulers had to address issues such as the legitimacy of their rule, the administration of Roman cities, and maintaining peace in vast and diverse territories. Despite these challenges, the barbarian kingdoms established themselves as the new dominant forces in Europe, marking the beginning of the Middle Ages and the end of the ancient Roman order. This process of transformation, led by the very barbarians who toppled Rome, deeply shaped the history of the continent.